You're listening to a Countout Podcast. Hello, everybody, and welcome to The Ballot, the podcast where the conversation begins. I'm your host, Ryan Knightsey. We're here discussing the Wrestling Observer Newsletter Hall of Fame case of FTR, aka The Revival, Cash Wheeler, Dax Harwood, Dax the Axe Harwood, famous podcaster Dax Harwood. And we are, of course, talking about their case. We appreciate everybody for joining us this month to talk about FTR. And this episode, we're joined by fellow podcaster, Voice of Wrestling podcaster, The Good, the Bad, and the Hungee co-host, Fred Morlan. Fred, how are you doing on this fine day?
Doing well, Ryan. Thanks for having me on. I'm excited to talk about the Hall of Fame because I'm a nerd for it, and excited to talk about FTR because they're an interesting act.
Yes, you've come to the right show where nerds can discuss podcasts and not discuss podcasts. Nerds can discuss wrestling and Hall of Fame and general things.
Just don't think Dax is making the podcasting Hall of Fame.
Oh no! Well, we'll see. We'll see. Maybe there's a historical significance in a negative manner, but I digress. Thank you so much for joining me, Fred. You put on a great podcast of The Good, the Bad, and the Hungee.
Oh, thank you.
Hungee. I was going to say hungry. That's not correct. So I'm glad you're on to discuss FTR.
Checks in the mail.
No problem. I appreciate it. My rate was met. And one of the things, I think a very important aspect up the jump for this episode is that, I go around looking for guests for the shows. Obviously, I'm trying to find like good people that have takes perhaps, or people that could fit. And obviously a person that does an AEW podcast, I think fits quite rightly, but also I go through the Voice of Wrestling Discord, that Hall of Fame section. And I think not necessarily positive per se. I mean, I think it was leaning positive, but I think you were the only person in that Discord that was like, I'm interested in the FTR case, because there's a lot of people, I think it's fair to say, that aren't too interested in FTR's case. But I guess that leads me to the first question is, what is your connection with FTR, your connection with the Revival, and why is it that you're pro FTR at this point in time?
I will hold off on saying the pro thing. We'll get to that.
Your point.
I do enjoy them a lot as a tag team. I think when I got back into wrestling, like to actually watch it, was the build to Mania 30. And if my brain has not completely failed me, which, I mean, hey, look, that was right around the time that the Revival at that point was really starting to get their real push in NXT. Yeah, it was about a year later, but started to get attention as this really talented tag team down in NXT. And then I kind of stopped watching WWE around the time they're like, hey, please give us the Jamal Khashoggi money. And then they jumped to AEW right about the height of the pandemic. And I've been following them ever since I've been watching that promotion since day one.
Yeah, a sort of big time move. I feel like moving in that pandemic, because it was nice to give a little juice, I think, to the promotion as well, having a brand new tag team from the other company coming in. So in a way, it was poorly timed. In a way, it was also I think
extremely well timed. Yeah, I think actually.
So go ahead.
Part of the Wacky Races era of AEW.
I part of me wishes they still had their weird. Was it a Camino? I don't think it was a Camino.
No, they had a weird truck deal.
Yeah,
pickup truck.
Yeah, because then they had one. Cody had one, which if I recall correctly, he had one a week before FTR debuted, or something like that.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't remember who else. I mean, obviously Hangman and Page with the horse.
Oh, there was Trent's mom with the minivan.
Famously, Trent's mom. How can I forget Trent's mom?
I mean, I don't know how you could forget the minivan. I pop for that every time. I will say that I think I zig where a lot of the voices of wrestling people zag with regards to Trent's mom. I thought that was actually very entertaining and a little like, yeah, look, it's 2 hours. We're all stuck inside.
Yeah, I'm going to take any form of entertainment I can during the pandemic.
Yeah,
and even if it is I don't know, someone's mom driving a minivan with a cookie sheet, I believe at one point.
Yeah, I think she whacked someone with a cookie sheet, which, I mean, that is an extremely high-level mom weapon, but I digress.
That was perfect. Again, thank you for coming on. We're talking, of course, FTR. For those that are new to the show or don't know or aren't familiar enough with the Wrestling Observer Newsletter Hall of Fame, the criteria is this. The criteria for entry in the Wrestling Observer Hall of Fame is, quote, a combination of drawing power, being a great in-ring performer, or excelling in one's field in pro wrestling, as well as having historical significance in a positive manner. Candidates should have something to offer in all three of the categories mentioned, or be so outstanding in one or two that they deserve inclusion. Obviously, there's also these sort of like subcategories that sort of Dave has like loosely and or rather added to it of kind of this sort of thing. It's a whole mess sort of thing. But that's the general guideline. That's the general sort of three categories we have to work with. And we're talking beforehand about where you wanted to start. And you wanted to start over in that historical significance case, obviously in a positive manner. Why specifically did you want to talk about that first?
Actually, if I can put a slight pin in that just for now, I think one thing we do need to talk about before we even break down their case is how Dave has changed he's changed his approach to tag teams. I'll say, I don't think he really changed the rules, but he made it possible for people to be inducted twice and put a bigger emphasis on tag teams, which I think will definitely have an impact on the FTR discussion. So this was in 2022, and he made it where you can start voting for tag teams involving already inducted people. And that includes that first year voted in was two acts, one Los Villanos, of course, the legendary Mexican wrestling family, and then Holy Demon Army, which was Toshiaki Kawada, who was already in, and Akira Taue, who was not yet in. And this led to kind of a lot of discussion among the voting base. I think there was some people that like tried too hard to not grasp it in a sense.
Sure.
Like
it was weirdly controversial.
It felt like a very basic thing, frankly, because I mean, the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame allows acts to come in solo and as parts of groups, and I mean, the Basketball Hall of Fame inducts teams as well as individual players and coaches. But when it was introduced here, you would have thought that like Dave added a branch to the Hall of Fame for like, I don't know, monster truck drivers or something. Like
so that's Hulk Hogan. That is
yes, Big Show, the Giant,
Big Show, the Giant, of course,
and of course, first balloter, Medusa. So like, and I always thought that was kind of weird. I'm not trying to call anyone stupid or anything, but I just thought it was very odd how people like freaked out about it. And it's like, you kind of just look at the tag team. Now, I do think it's a lot harder for a tag team to get in.
I agree.
Just simply because tag teams typically don't stay together long enough to get the kind of career that is considered Hall of Fame worthy. The FTR is an outlier in this sense so far. I mean, they've basically been together for a decade at this point.
Yep.
And so I think they're worthy of being on the ballot. And we'll break down the case, but my prediction, I'll just go ahead and lay this out, is I think they will fall off the ballot immediately.
I think that's a solid thesis statement. And I don't think that's a thesis statement that I necessarily disagree with. Because whereas I do agree that they should be on the ballot, and I do think they deserve inclusion. I think a big part of it for me as well is just, it is this sort of thing of, when sometimes Dave adds modern US and Canada people, there's an element where it feels too early. And not to say that like FDR don't have like a good grasp so far, but it does feel like they're still very much building their case. I mean, literally this year, 2025, they're getting hot, reheated a little bit again. They got this new gimmick. They're teaming up with Stokely Hathaway. I really enjoyed their stuff so far. I really enjoyed their Double or Nothing match. Because I like the new energy that they're bringing into it. But to that point, it is they're still defining very much that I guess Hall of Fame case.
Yeah, and another thing to consider is that they're going on the ballot with 3 tag teams that are staying on the ballot at this point. Those are the Briscoe brothers, the Steiner brothers, and the non-brother Outsiders.
Yes. The brother brothers.
Oh, and the Jeff Hardys, the Jeff and the Matt Hardys. I think I forgot to say them as well. So that's 3 brother tag teams, and first of all, that puts them at a massive disadvantage, obviously. But seriously, I think that when you're a voter, you're naturally going to compare them to those other teams that are on this ballot, and I think in some ways, FTR has its advantages and FTR has its disadvantages against those 4 teams historically, and we'll get to those.
I'm trying to remember if I recall why Dave opened up the door a little bit more to tag teams. I think it's just because it's a little bit harder and he's trying to make it a little bit easier. But I'm trying to think of trying to recall from 5 years ago why Dave did that, because he didn't really have to do that. But I'm trying to remember if he gave a reason. Do you at all recall?
I unfortunately do not. That is slipped out of the Swiss cheese brain and hit the floor somewhere along the way. I can do a stealthy search of the newsletter archive and see what I can find. But that will take some time, obviously. No
worries. Well, let's get into it. Let's talk about the FTR case, as it were. We're both sort of in that negative zone for Hall of Fame case. I'm sort of leaning into the classic defining phrase of Hall of Very Good as of this moment. But I think we'll talk about it more as we continue. You wanted to start with historical significance. I think that, to continue the topic of what we're discussing, historical significance for any modern team starts very difficult when you go onto the ballot, because it is very much you're defining your legacy literally right now. Obviously there are other people that have go on that have better advantages. Cody Rhodes pops on last year. His historical significance case is pretty strong from the jump, just because of the creation of AEW and all these sort of things. How do you see the historical significance case of FTR?
I see this pretty damn close to 0, frankly, and it's not an offense on them. This is, I think, the hardest case to actually have, especially as you mentioned when you're still kind of mid your peak. Now let's just take a quick look at last year's Hall of Fame inductees. I mean, the Young Bucks were inducted, and I would definitely give them points for their role in co-founding AEW. I would also give them points for getting themselves over to a huge extent without the WWE marketing machine at a time where that felt virtually impossible.
Yep.
They got their own T-shirts in a Hot Topic
yep.
When WWE was the only game in town in the U.S. essentially. That's tremendously influential. Bobby Davis was inducted, the legendary manager, and I'd say influence was virtually his number one aspect, just because every successive manager kind of based their act on Bobby Davis. So because of that, he is to me, he was a great manager by all counts, but even beyond that, his influence is what really made him an obvious candidate to me. And I think Shima was also inducted last year, and another, I think one of his underrated aspects, he was the main star and a great in-ring worker in Dragon Gate, but also he really helped popularize that style. He scouted a lot of younger talents, including the Young Bucks, Ricochet, Brody Lee, amongst various others, and got them over to Dragon Gate and helped spread the Dragon Gate kind of Lucha Reisu style across the world. And really, I think when you just watch major, any kind of wrestling in 2025, you're seeing that influence. So I think that was an extremely strong argument. But there's other people that got inducted. I did not vote for Roman Reigns, but we all know why he got inducted, and that's because he's been the top guy in WWE for their hottest period in probably 2 decades. Shingo Takagi got in because he was a pretty good Dragon Gate draw, but he's an exceptional worker. I can't really point to a strong influence case from him that comes to mind. And Paul Orndorff, underrated draw, damn good worker, and I just can't think of a reasonable influence case for him either. So it's I would say it's probably the rarest case to be the driving point of influence over the past, I don't know, 10 or so elections, even more so than in-ring ability. So like it's not a knock on FTR. It's just like you know, if there was a bunch of FTR knockoffs, which I guess that would just be good tag team. That sounds really negative. I'm not trying to be, but
well,
I mean, like
it's also strange because FTR in a lot of ways very much is trying to be not knockoffs in the derogatory sense, but you know, showcasing the tag team wrestling of old, right? Like they are trying to dwindle themselves down, so making it. There's almost a copy of a copy element there that I think.
Right, exactly. Yeah, it's like I mean, in a sense, it's like them to classic tag teams is kind of Hayabusa is to Sabu. You know, like it just picks up a lot of the act. Like I think FTR just works a very modern style, but like they've almost tricked a bunch of the like wrestling used to be better back in the day folks by like replacing all the, you know, instead of doing like the Meltzer driver like the Young Bucks or whatever else from their moveset, they just replace it with like, hey, remember this tag team? Here's their finisher, like kind of stuff. Again, not a knock. I think they're a fantastic in-ring team, but like that's their shtick. And a bunch of people like have bit it really hard and are like, they get it. It's like, yes, they get to watch old tapes and be like, hey, the Power and Glory finisher ruled. Let's do that, you know?
Yeah, I think that's a great. The Hayabusa case is that's a very interesting. I kind of agree with that opinion of just that, you know, I mean, obviously, I think it's way too early to say that the Revival will have any sort of influence on the younger generation because it's still very much.
Yeah, and they may have a great influence case in 5, 10, 20 years, something like that. But as of right now, it's not there.
But the idea that they are heavily influenced, not obviously entirely by one team, but a bunch of classic, especially Southern tag teams, the territory days, it is that thing of they are there is a carbon copy element. There is a Frankenstein element of these Southern great tag teams.
And I mean, like every wrestler bites from other wrestlers. Of course. Like, let's not act like this is something bad with them. It's just I'm always endlessly amused by like the conversation around FTR, which I feel like peaked around 4 years ago, but like still this kind of air of like, they're the only old school tag team around. And I'm like, well, they aren't really like that old school. You know?
It's also part of the gimmick, you know. It's that is the idea.
Yeah.
So I was trying to think of some historical significance ideas sort of around them, you know, things that, you know, I think there's definitely elements of, you know, they are some not the, I think it's fair to say, but a great tag team of the modern age, right?
Yeah.
I think that's fair to say. I think they do have, you know, this would come more of like their working ability, but they do have these sort of waves of sort of consistency and inconsistency where it's like they're sometimes really, really great, but then sometimes they're kind of on the lower end of things. Well, not necessarily the lower end, but, you know, just sort of in a heat, really, I guess is what it is. But they're definitely, I think, a great tag team of the modern age. I don't necessarily think that they have the sort of longevity or consistency to back that. But I was also trying to think if they had any sort of like matches that really like showcase and signify this. I talked about this last month in the Mercedes Moné episode about how I think it's very fair to say that the NXT Brooklyn match with Bayley was a very historically significant match in women's wrestling. That was really the thing that kicked off the sort of women's revolution, as much as Stephanie McMahon would have you think. I did that joke.
The inventor of women's wrestling.
Yeah, I did that joke in the last episode, so I've reused that joke twice, just for the audience at home. But, you know, in that episode, I talked about how, you know, that was a real turning point in women's wrestling. To that extent, the Revival versus DIY in the NXT was also, I think, a big match in terms of a modern tag team sense. The problem is that I don't really feel like that had any sort of long-lasting staying power, or not even long-lasting, but just like immediately turnaround in sort of the tag team division. I think in NXT, you have like the tag teams get more showcase for sure. Obviously, it doesn't last too long because then you have DIY break up and have their big feud. But, you know, there is this but then when you get to the main roster, there really is no difference. I mean, that's one of the big reasons why the Revival ended up leaving, is the tag team thing is really happening, because as we sort of talked about, and as you mentioned with the Young Bucks, it's really happening outside of the WWE. They don't have that historically significant match, because that's a great match, but it did not change what happened in WWE in any regard comparative to, let's say, NXT Brooklyn.
Yeah, and Vince was never really a tag team guy, and this was at the peak of, like, Vince has lost his touch booking too. So because they're just kind of two dudes that wrestle really well, and have this vaguely, like, old school thing attached to them, which they haven't really fully embraced. I mean, they kind of embrace it, but it's not really fully featured with them, because they are badly used on the main roster. But I think what's really interesting is, even with their time in NXT, they were never put in a prominent takeover position. Like, I think that DIY match was, like, fairly hyped, but it was not they were never in a semi-main or main event.
Oh, you spoiled my little tidbit for drawing case. Not a single time where they were ever in main event or semi-main event. And when I told it to my co-host on Ring Post Radio, Scotty Edwards, he was kind of like taken aback. I was like, surely they were.
No, I know. I was surprised too.
I was like, surely they were in some sort of main event or semi-main event. And I had even, this is sort of leading into the drawing thing, but even with, like, their year-long feud with the Briscoes and Ring of Honor, looking back at it, and just, I don't remember it, but in right now, but looking back on it, it was like, oh, they only main evented, semi-main evented one of those three shows. That feels weird. There's just something about that is very interesting. But
yeah,
but the point about historical significance, I think, as well, is that, like, I think they have elements of, like, the beginnings of something. I think they're like a high level tag team for, like, let's say the past 5 years. I think that they have an all-time feud with the Briscoes, but, like, I think that's it. I'm trying to think, like, I think that's pretty much it.
Also, they weirdly don't work well with the Bucks, as well as you would hope, I'd say. So, like, you kind of build up this dream match, and then every time they have it, it's just like, oh, this is how is this, like, the one matchup for either of you guys that just doesn't exactly work?
Yeah,
I'm not saying they like stunk or anything, but they definitely never reached that super high level you would really expect on paper, with maybe the exception of the Full Gear match. But
I'm glad you brought that up, because every single time, I've been doing Ring Post Radio for the past several years, but every single time they had, like, a match, it was always me being like, why did this match weirdly stink? Why did rather not stink, but, like, and part of it, I think, was expectations. Like,
expectations were sky high for him. Let's be clear. Like, that's really what I'm trying to say. I'm phrasing it fairly poorly, because, I mean, like, looking back, their lowest match with the Jacksons, I think, as far as just a straight tag on cage match, is like a 8.5, basically. Yeah, which is very good. But, like, they never, you could argue at least that they never really truly had that, like, top shelf match with the Young Bucks, despite being in the same promotion for basically 5 years now.
Which is very interesting, because the Young Bucks are officially a Hall of Fame tag team, and and there's, like, that aspect. Is there any really more to say with the historical significance case? I feel like
not at this time. I think that, this is, like I said, I think this is arguably the hardest one to fulfill, and I just don't think they've done it. I don't think they were really close to it, and part of that is just because they're, like, still actively wrestling, and you would expect them to be active for several more years. And otherwise, part of it is just their argument for the Hall of Fame is largely just ring work. So
I was trying to look up, you said how they'll do it for many more years or something like that. I was just like, how old are they? Dax the Axe, 40 years old, Cash Wheeler, 38 years old. So
yeah, so I could easily see them still being a great tag team in 2030,
I think that's fair to say. 2030, 2035.
That gets tough, just the miles and the bumps,
Let's talk about that drawing case, since we sort of already talked about it. We've already mentioned they never main evented or semi-main evented any single NXT takeover.
Right.
That does extend into the WWE pay-per-views as well. Never main event or semi-main evented there. That is less surprising, but it is a thing to note.
Yeah. Quick question: can I curse on your show?
Yes, you
I
can.
know. Okay, great. They sure as fuck didn't draw WWE. Now that's not their fault. Let's be clear.
Yeah.
They were treated horribly, but I mean, it matters, I mean, they were champions and stuff, sure, but like, it wasn't too long before you got to the like, hey, let's job them out to a child in Braun Strowman, or have them shave their backs.
Remember when they were 24/7 champions?
Oh boy, I'd rather not. Can I say that?
Yes, you can.
And there's just a lot of like clearly Vince had no idea what to do with these guys, which is kind of amazing because Vince is supposed to be the greatest creative genius of all time. And like, it's just like, hey, here's a tag team that can cut old school promos and wrestle very well. You should probably use them. And he was like, what if shave back?
It obviously makes sense why Vince never really enjoyed them, because they were old school Southern wrestling.
Yeah, very unvince.
Yeah, I don't know exactly what they were thinking. That was never going to work with Vince. And obviously, hey, look, I mean, Fred, maybe they would have become draws in WWE if they became Flavor Flav knockoffs. Who could say? Maybe that was the gimmick they would have gotten.
Oh, I actually don't think I've ever seen. Wait, hold on. Have I seen the reworked? Oh, I have seen these. These are some of the worst things I've ever seen. Yeah. I forgot about this. We need
bad.
This podcast is now about the Vince McMahon proposed gimmick change.
I gotta pull this up if we're diving into it. Hold on. Maybe I shouldn't write Flavor Flav. Maybe that won't get me anywhere.
For those at home, I just searched Vince McMahon the Revival on the Google machine, and it should work for you.
Oh yes, yeah, the giant clock.
Yeah, like a giant clock that just says Shatter Machine very largely. The worst set of gear I've like. They
I don't even know why was he pitching this idea? Because this was what, 2019. I forgot the lipstick.
Yeah, the lipstick. He wanted to keep them. Basically, I think the timeline is essentially they requested their release, and then in 2019, and then shortly before they left, he was like, "All right, this is my idea for you."
Do you think this idea was that like we want to be the Fantastics, and so they're like, "Okay, great, we'll give you bow ties, and it looks like sticks." I don't know if there's any glow sticks.
They gave them everything. It's like you went into like a 2K creative wrestler and we're just like, yeah, let's do all the accessories. They gave them bow ties, they gave them suspenders, they gave them like thigh-high pants.
Yep.
They gave them 3 different armbands. They gave them arm streamers. They gave them each a hat. Dax got a little skull cap while Cash got a top hat.
Well, he has
a bike collar.
He's a skull cap in other pictures, but then he has one giant, like, I don't know, like a Mad Hatter Batman thing.
Yeah, basically that. Yeah, the Mad Hatter. It is like you're like a 10-year-old was like, I create wrestler, and it's very cool to have things on wrestler. Therefore, we'll put all things on a wrestler.
You know what this is that like their whole gimmick is their old school Southern Territory tag teams. This is Vince McMahon being like, well, this was my old school 80s tag teams. Or not necessarily tag teams, but like this was my 80s idea.
Apparently, Cash Wheeler laughed in Vince's face when they were offered this. So maybe we should go back to the historical significance argument.
But no, that's the case.
Yeah. But seriously, like it. Oh boy, that was rough. The main roster was pretty bad. I mean, if I pull up their match guide on the old cage match, and you sort by time, I mean, you go back to that, and it's like they had a nice match with Bobby Fish and Kyle O'Reilly in 2019. And they had
that was probably a Survivor Series or something, because why else would they have wrestled them?
Yeah, there was a New Day tag that was well received, and Bobby Roode and Chad Gable team tag team match, and then like that was it for the main roster, more or less, at least as far as matches at 7.5. So like that's just not a good period. So like for any aspect of their drawing power. So you get an AEW, and this is when they actually start to be pushed in kind of major matches, and I say kind of because, well, we'll see. So they were in the main event of Double or Nothing 2021, which is a stadium stampede, but they were just like secondary goons in that, essentially.
Yeah, they were of the pinnacle at that point in time.
Yeah, their only Ring of Honor main event, or even semi-main, was the best 2 out of 3 falls match with the Briscoes in 2022 at Death Before Dishonor, which would have been the second match of the series. Yes. You can give them credit, I think, for that. Whatever show the third one was, I can't remember. Yes, because you can argue, well, everyone knew that was actually one of, if not the biggest match on that show, and like they probably didn't want to put it right before the Chris Jericho main event because it's Chris Jericho, in 2022. And obviously FTR and the Briscoes are just going to kill each other, which they did in the dog collar match. So you could give them credit for that one, but it's a Ring of Honor show, right? It is basically, I think, the biggest business Ring of Honor ever did historically, or at least close to it.
I believe so.
But still, that's when you start adding those caveats, it's typically not a strong point for the average Hall of Fame voter.
Yeah, for context, at Death Before Dishonor, where they had the 2 out of 3 falls with the Briscoe, where they main evented, 3,100 in attendance. Final battle with the dog collar match, where it's technically not main event or semi-main event, but certainly a hyped, super hyped match. 2602 was the attendance, so it did dip. And then the first one, first one of the feud, doesn't main event or semi-main event. That was 1978 Supercard of Honor, obviously WrestleMania weekend. Yeah,
and I don't think that was super anticipated at that point. Like I think people expected it to be a good match. I don't think they expected it to be nearly as good as it was.
Yeah.
So you go on, they're in the semi-main of AAA's 2022 Hero Anniversario Triple X against Dragon Lee and Dralisco, which is best known as the match where Conan kind of backstabs Tony Khan and uses that to announce that Dragon Lee is going to WWE. And boy, didn't that work out great for everyone involved. Next up was All Out 2023, where they teamed with the Bucks against Bullet Club Gold to set up future matches. This was in the semi-main spot, but I wouldn't argue that this was close to the number 2 match on that card, because the main was Moxley against Orange Cassidy, but you also had Takeshita versus Omega, Danielson against Ricky Starks in the strap match, and I guess you could argue something about Cole and MJF tag teaming.
This was also a week after Wembley, if I recall.
Yeah, really weird timing on that pay-per-view.
9,800 in attendance for that pay-per-view, by the way.
Yeah, and 115,000 pay-per-view buys, which was basically like where they've been for large chunks of their existence, AEW. They're in the semi-main of Wrestle Dream 2023 against Aussie Open. Again, I would not argue that was the number 2 match on that show. They had Christian and Darby, Bryan Danielson, Zack Sabre Jr., Swerve and Adam Page, and again, you had like MJF and awful undercard tag team action. Then Dynasty 2024, the ladder match with the Bucks. You can argue that is maybe not even the number 2 match at that show, just because that show also had the main event of Swerve Strickland against Samoa Joe and Will Ospreay versus Bryan Danielson.
Both of those shows a little 6,500 basically 6619 for Dynasty, 6,700 for Wrestle Dream. I guess you could maybe say that like these are also the brand new pay-per-views for and in 2023 2024 these are brand new pay-per-views for AEW. Maybe there's an argument of like the crowd wasn't sure what the quality of the thing was because
I would say but the pay-per-view buys kind of dissuade that or discount that. So exactly. I don't think that's really a valuable argument, unfortunately. And then their last one was the main event of Double or Nothing last year, which had Anarchy in the arena.
Same sort of issues with Stadium Stampede.
Yeah, so I just don't see really a definitely not a Hall of Fame drawing power argument with them, unfortunately. So I have to more or less outright dismiss this one.
Yeah, I mean, it's the same sort of thing. I talked about with the Mercedes Moné thing that, you talk about women's wrestling as well, is that an obvious big part of it is just like, when you look at NXT or WB, it's the sheer lack of even putting them anywhere close to a main event slot or anything, right? It's like unproven. But then you get to AEW and Ring of Honor, and they really main event, semi-main event, 5 shows, 2 of which they're 2 people, part of a 10-man gimmick match.
So not the central parts of it either.
Yeah, 2 of them are brand new pay-per-views, which did obviously still remain good buys. All Out semi-main event did do 9,800, which grew from 9,100 in 2022. So I guess that's something, but even then, it is what it is. And then Ring of Honor, like I said, they main evented the Ring of Honor show that did the best attendance. That's certainly something. What I'm speaking to is 2, maybe, like they drew maybe twice over the past 10 years as a tag team.
And it's unfortunate for them because I would argue that, or you could argue, I should say, that, they were never given the opportunity, which sure, but like, it kind of comes down to what you've actually done rather than the theoretical when it comes to this argument. And what I would point to specifically is Samoa Joe. Now, on paper, Samoa Joe should have, moonwalked into the Hall of Fame, just given his talent and his abilities and everything. And instead, he suffered through years and years of misuse in TNA and WWE. And, we can argue, we can say like, oh, Joe is a Hall of Fame talent, like talent wise. Yeah, for sure. But when it comes down to like what you've actually recorded,
yeah,
it's that's what you got to discuss. And unfortunately for Joe, like he had double-digit years of his career just wasted by idiots. And I think FTR can point to a much lesser version of that argument, but that's not a needle mover when it comes to this discussion. They might have been more. Well, they weren't. You can only discuss what actually happened.
Yeah, I mean, I brought up earlier that they were, of the past 5 years, they were probably a good top tag team. I mean, just to bring up the point all the way home, top 3 Wrestling Observer Award Tag Team of the Year for 5 years straight, 2020 to 2024. But I was going to bring this up later for for working ability, but Fred, you might enjoy this. This is a nerds podcast. I went through in my own free time and like collated, is that the word? Of all of top awards for Wrestling Observer, PWI, Tokyo Sports, FSM 50. I think there was one more, but I couldn't remember what it was. And just took like the top awards, tag team, women's, outstanding, whatever it might be. And if a person or a tag team or whatever popped up in 2 categories or 2 lists, then they get added to this thing. So I have this giant list going all the way back to the beginning of basically awards in this sort of things of, how people did. And to that point, it's this sort of idea. What I'm trying to find is that like, if you have a great year, that's one thing. But if multiple outlets are saying you had a great year, I think there's some argument kind of to like, well, that's kind of a really great year, maybe like a historically significant year. That's what I'm trying to sort of find to see if that theory is correct. So all this to say, Wrestling Observer Tag Team for the past 5 years, but really when you take all that correlation, all that math that I did, great years defined as 2016, 2020, 2022, 2023. Why do I bring all of this up? Is because great years, but when we go to drawing power, they have like when they're super hot, they're finally in some semi-main events with the Young Bucks and Bullet Club Blood All Out 2023. They have a semi-main event versus Aussie Open, and then by Dynasty 2024, that's when things start falling off the ship a little bit, and the drawing numbers still fall down, and they haven't done anything since. All this to say, and I think it's very obvious that there I went overdid the data points on something that's very obvious. When they're hot, that's when they become maybe draws. But when they're not hot as an act, or they're not working, or they go a podcast and it turns people off, then they're not getting pushed to the top of the card. They're not even going to be given those opportunities. So all to say is that when they're hot, they might be draws, but like it's really, there's so little evidence to suggest any of this stuff.
Yeah. Now, when you discuss ring work, some people will just outright treat it like it's a fully subjective category. And let's be clear, it is to an extent subjective. Yeah. I mean, you could argue that all of them are to some extent, but I mean, it's the one that's the least backed in data. But I feel like that's a flawed way of looking at it, because you do have, especially with these, with the past 40 so years, between the Observer Awards and various other polls, you do have a lot of like actual data showing how they are received by other people. Mm-hmm. I think a good example of this is the Steiners. I think that if you go back and watch some of their like 1991, 92 era work, you probably will like it. I think I like it. But you may also be like, well, people, maybe a little jaded just because, it is 30 years ago and the work isn't exactly the same as like the Young Bucks or even FTR. But if you go back and look at the polling for them at that point in time, like Scott Steiner was in particular, but the Steiner brothers were like very highly talked about for a few years there. So my point is that, so you can look at actual like poll results. Now, the FSM 50 is one that I looked at, and we have like 10 years of results of that from Voices of Wrestling, and then before that. But that's the before is not relevant to the revival FTR by their career. FTR has only one appearance in the FSM 50. Mm-hmm. And it was in 2022, and it wasn't technically FTR. It was just Dax Harwood.
Yep. He did, because he did a bunch of singles matches, and it was a good year for singles matches. I personally think that's one that I disagree with in hindsight. That was before I joined the panel, I believe, and it's one I would have fought pretty hard on because, well, Dax did do several high-profile singles matches in what really felt like a naked, like, Meltzer give me the best wrestler award kind of stuff. And look, I mean, I'm not going to complain about someone going out and be like, hey, I'm going to have a lot of matches just to show you. I'm like, yeah, show me the matches. That rolls. To note as well, he got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 in the most outstanding wrestler in the Observer Awards that year.
Yeah. But, I feel like that FTR should have been listed together that year, and I think Cash was enough. FTR was in enough great matches that year to warrant a inclusion of the tag team. But like that's the only time that they made it. So we go over to the Observer Awards, and they were never in Most Outstanding, which I think it's very rare for tag teams to get votes in those categories. They're mainly treated as like solo categories.
Yeah.
So we have to go to the Tag Team of the Year award. And they are 6-time top 3 finishers. They finished second in 2016, now very distantly to the Young Bucks.
Yep.
But they were second. If I read my chart correctly, they were third in 2020.
Yep.
They were third in 2021.
Yep.
They won in 2022 and 2023, and then last year they fell to 2024.
Correct.
And using award shares, which I've wrote several articles about. So for those not familiar, a quick thing. Award shares is when you take the possible number of points received in award voting, and you go year over year, and you make it a percentage, and then you add it up over the athlete's career. And it is kind of a rule of thumb way of looking at all-time athletes to compare across eras and everything. And just as a quick example, if you do that with the NBA and their MVP voting, your top 10 all time is LeBron, Michael Jordan, Kareem, Larry Bird, Magic Johnson, Bill Russell, Shaquille O'Neal, Karl Malone, Tim Duncan, and Kobe Bryant.
Pretty solid list.
Solid list. Yeah. And the Wikipedia has an article about this. You can go there and check it out. But basically, if you were to receive every first place vote, you would get like a one of a award share. Sorry. So if you calculate that for the length of the Wrestling Observer Newsletter's Tag Team Award, FTR is third fourth if you combine the Midnight Express's various formations into just one monolith. That's probably their strongest data point, I think, objectively, along with the 2-time winning. They did receive points in Match of the Year 4 times. 2022 was the only time they really received a significant amount of points in that award. And that's more or less it for the Observer Awards. So there's an argument that they've had some good years. I think if you are being as kind as possible to them, if you're giving them every single point in their favor that you could, you could argue that they have, as a Hall of Fame year, basically every year they received points in the voting for the Observer Awards. So again, 16, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24. And I feel like you can safely give them credit so far for this year to some extent, if you were being super generous. This is their best year in a couple years, I think, so far. We'll see if someone gets hurt or, God forbid, or anything like that,
Or, we still have an entire half the year left to go. I mean, we're recording this in June. This comes out in August, but, so we still have half the year left to see how the rest of this gimmick goes.
Yeah. So, let's just leave this year out of it entirely. So you've got an argument that best case, they have 6 Hall of Fame years. My kind of unscientific rule of thumb when it comes to drawing and or in-ring work is that I start to consider, you get on the radar at all with 5. And around 7-ish is when I start to I could vote for you, depending. So I think that FTR is kindly right on the radar.
They're circling the drain a little bit.
Yeah, they're on the very outskirts of it. I think the biggest issue with it is just some of those AEW, you'd have to say that every year they are in AEW, they are a Hall of Fame tag team. I don't know. I mean, that seems because there's a lot of time.
Years. 2022 is certainly
for sure. Yeah, 20. That's arguably the best year of their career. You could give them credit for, I think, 2020 probably. Because they did come in, they felt like a big deal when they came in. Not not a super drawing act or anything, but they felt like a meaningful jump. And then 2021, 2023, 2024. I don't those are less of slam dunk years for sure.
Yeah, I mean, even my combined nonsense of looking over the awards, it only walks away with 4 years of 2016, 2020, and 2022, 23.
Yeah,
and that's me combining stuff. I can expand it out to the 6 years that you're talking about, but in the same breath. But it is it's not a lot. And I think the bigger aspect of also what we're talking about is the continuation of that lack of consistency, where it's obviously the main roster that we talked that to the
just 3 lost years.
You toss that to the side, but even within AEW, it's 2021. I think the latter half of 2023 is really, especially when it starts falling apart a little bit for them, and then 2024 is just no, we're just gonna toss it to the side.
And they had good matches during this time period. I think it's easy for people to overlook it for 2023 and 2024, but they are booked basically as choose one, CM Punk, Adam Copeland. They're little buddies, they're sidekicks.
Especially
and that's not
24 with Copeland.
And that's not a Hall of Fame year, really, unless you're doing 4 Horsemen business or NWO business, and they weren't doing that stuff, So, I think that really, if you're really super into their ring work, I could see someone voting for them, but that's the outer, that's the best case scenario. And I think let's compare them to who else is on the ballot right now. I mean, if you look at the Briscoes, yes, all their work was in Ring of Honor, sure, and there's some voters that rightly or wrongly, hint wrongly, will say that doesn't count for anything, which is, I think, really an
insane statement.
I mean, I think that the Briscoes having great tag team matches for 15 years should count for something. even if it wasn't in WWE. But unfortunately, the voter base seems to think that if it was in WWE or maybe AEW the past couple of years, it doesn't count since in this century in the U.S.
Which sucks.
Yeah, it does. And it extends beyond the U.S. Like Kento Miyahara was on the ballot last year. I voted for Kento Miyahara because I think he is an absolute Hall of Fame level worker. I may be like on the early side for that. Maybe some people would join me in like 2 or 3 years, assuming a certain level of output. But like, I just think he's fantastic. So I was like, yeah, he's an in-ring worker. Fell off the ballot immediately. So. Which
to a certain degree I get, because I did that last year of Gerard Petrolio, where we sort of talked about how, like, especially last year, it was like still we were very much at this sort of transitional point with All Japan with Kento Miyahara. I think we're still on the latter half of transition. We're still in the latter half of transitioning, and we're not fully into it yet. But with business tag team, him and Aoyagi. But it is this thing of like we're transitioning away from him, and that's I think Gerard brought that up, is that like that then goes into like historical significance of like once we transition away from him, what does like he become as like this figure of All Japan?
Yeah, like his drawing argument is basically he kept All Japan alive for like a decade or so, and like that's nice and all, but we're talking about basically an indie, and clearly that doesn't move the needle for people. So like if we're just talking in ring, the Briscoes frankly lapped them just because of the sheer number of years they did it.
That longevity.
The Steiner brothers, I think, are a little tougher now. They're only going to be in modern for a couple more years, assuming they stay on the ballot. But I mean, they only got 32% last year. They did have some very highly acclaimed years, but they were also like basically done as a high level tag team by like 94.
Yeah. That combined list I have is 90 to 93 for them.
Yeah. They would jump to WWF and they had like what was a very Vince like, hey, great first 6 months, and then oh great, you're a tag team, I don't care. Kind of thing.
Are we talking about the Revival, or are we talking about the Steiners?
No, it's time is a flat circle. He did the very same thing with them. The Hardys, they had more than 6 years, I think, if I recall correctly, and they definitely have a better influence argument. You can argue about how like ladder bumps and so on and so forth, but like clearly they had a outsized influence on tag team wrestling going forward. They kind of changed how the formula worked.
Yeah,
to a certain extent. The Outsiders, their argument is that basically they were part of the NWO, and I mean that's a hell of a lot stronger influence and drawing than anything FTR has ever done, unfortunately for them. So I don't know that if you look at the tag teams and you were to rank them, just the ones on the ballot, if you were to end up with FTR 5 out of 5, I don't think you could really say that's wrong.
Yeah, it's a tough one. I mean, I think we should also clarify for the audience at home that maybe at this point hate us for our takes. We're not saying that they're a bad tag team.
Oh no, absolutely not. No,
Hall of Fame level we're talking.
Yeah, and it's getting to the point where like you're one of the all-timers. It's very hard. And if you look at tag teams, I mean, I drew this up from looking at them. There's only one tag team from this century that has been inducted. We're a quarter of the way through the century, basically. The Young Bucks. That's it. No one else. The Briscoes haven't hit 40% voting, I don't think.
They are at 37.4.
Right. And you need 60% to get in. Like the teams that are on the ballot right now, excluding obviously the Steiners and Outsiders for time period purposes, I mean, I think you'd be hard pressed to argue that there's a team that's been omitted from the ballot at this point, at least in the U.S. for this Hall of Fame discussion.
I mean, in terms of being on the ballot, it's the sort of thing of like, I think the only other big name tag team would be the Usos, but they were on the ballot last year and fell off immediately.
Exactly right. So, and just looking like historically again in the U.S., the Rock and Roll Express weren't inducted until 2014.
Yeah, which is crazy.
The Midnight Express weren't inducted until 2009.
Mm-hmm.
The Fabulous Freebirds weren't inducted until 2005.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, all three of those acts were well done by that point, at least as major acts. I mean, I know that the Rock and Roll Express are still working, but like, you know, let's be real here about like this discussion we're having.
Mm-hmm.
So like, you know, we're talking about FTR, not quite mid-career, but you know, like still like putting points on the board.
I think that's a fair question to ask. Where are they in their career? Do we feel like under the midpoint, the latter half, first half? I mean,
maybe like 2/3 through, you know,
yeah,
maybe
that feels right.
I mean, even, you know, counting the awful WWE main roster years, which, you know, is part of it, obviously.
Yeah.
It's just like, it's really hard to get in the Hall of Fame. And I think especially hard as a tag team, for better or worse. You could argue that that's overly harsh on tag teams.
Mm-hmm. Which is maybe why Dave tried to open the door a little bit at the beginning of our conversation.
I think there's an argument that you should probably loosen the standards a little bit for tag teams, just because we're kind of having a slightly different discussion. Their runtime is so much shorter than an individual's career, so maybe it's fair to have a different kind of discussion, or at least have different guideposts for those discussions, kind of based on career length.
Yep.
But
they're historically handicapped when it comes to like being top of level spots or anything like that.
Obviously, I'm not saying like tag team, like, you know, I'm not saying put Axiom and Nathan Frazier in right now, because you know, they had a nice year. But I mean, it's would not shock me. They've already been teasing this slightly, that they'll be broken up as a tag team by next year, like just because of how booking is in the US. So
which
like
is insane, by the way.
It is. You can just have a good tag team. You know, like I don't know if people forget this.
Yeah,
but like the whole point of this discussion with FTR is like, they've had great years, but like I just don't see a path for them being a Hall of Famer, and I don't think I will vote for them this year, especially because we are going to have less votes. It seems, compared to last year. Last year, we could vote for 7 people. From the modern US and Canada, and this year it looks like, barring like another edition, we're going to have 5 slots. So I'm already like, if I just vote for the people I voted for last year, I'm already maxed out.
Obviously, I mean, that is I think it's gonna be very interesting for modern US and Canada this year, just because it is like there are 2 less votes per voter, but then there's also a lot of like those top names like Roman and Young Bucks have gone in. It's like, where are all these votes going to go? You know, I don't necessarily see FTR in a good light either in terms of the Hall of Fame. Like we said, I do think they're a great team. I do think they're a solid team.
If you were to tell me that they were inducted in 10 years, like, I wouldn't be shocked. But like, I'd assume that part of that is that they put in at least like 3 more great years.
Yes. And you know, kind of what we said a little bit earlier is that I think 2025 is leaning, as of right now in June, towards a really solid year. But then, okay, that's one more. we need a couple more after that.
Even saying that, like, they haven't been put close to a main event spot. I think they've been doing fantastic work. Like, they've stolen the show on Collision. Like, that's their show at this very moment, I think, because they're just cutting great promos. They're fantastic heels. Part of their problem in the kind of the micro look is that they spent like 18 months as like directionless baby faces.
Yep.
Which is kind of a double whammy. I mean, because like being directionless isn't going to help a case specifically, but also like they're so much better as heels. Like, they're just great at being these dicks, and they finally have turned heel, and they're finally doing their best, kind of what they're best inclined towards doing. And you know, it's kind of unfortunate that it took this long to get here. I do think you can't say that AEW, that Tony Khan has booked them as badly as Vince did for several years.
I think that's very fair to say.
But I think it's also very fair to be kind of critical of how Tony Khan is, in a sense, forgotten them in the booking, like has not kept them very high on the card at points, has kind of just been like, you know, like I would compare it to like currently how he uses Mark Briscoe. Like, yeah, you're really reliable workers, and I love having you on the shows because you'll help have great matches, but like, I don't see you moving the needle.
Which sucks because I mean, Mark Briscoe was like for 2024 for me, my AEW MVP.
Oh, don't get me started on Briscoe. Like I had a whole rant about this with Alan when we broke down last year's FSM 50. I mean, he made the list, but my whole thing was like, imagine if like Briscoe was pushed as a main eventer, which I think you should probably do, or at least like the outer edges of it. Like kind of choose your favorite like upper mid carder that is not quite a main eventer, but instead of like the mid carder that shows up, is friends with every baby face and loses virtually every match, that's just my argument. It's kind of frustrating, but that's beside the point. I think FTR is a fantastic tag team. If I were to go through, I did a top 100 wrestlers list for the past couple years. I had FTR 22nd last year. I had FTR 49th in 2023. 2022, I don't think that I have like a really formal list, but they would have been like 7th-ish or 8th. I mean, that's really damn good when, I'm trying to follow, like, basically I don't accomplish it, but I try to follow every main event, or every major company in the world, which is impossible. I just, it's just not enough. Like, unless you're giving them a lot of points for NXT or a lot of points for these kind of lesser AEW years, I just don't see the argument for them getting a vote. Now, I think they're fine to put on the ballot at this point, but I don't think they're a serious Hall of Fame candidate, like when the rubber meets the road, until, again, like if they put 3 more high-level years in, or 5 more, or something along those lines. But just right now, like, not enough. Sorry.
Which to I guess close out this portion of the conversation is that, unless we have any other tidbits we want to talk about, it's the thing of kind of that they just need a couple more great years, and I would really consider them. But the problem is that I do think we're on that latter half, that we're sort of starting to run out of time of how much more we can do with them, especially when, like, with AEW, when like you want to start pushing a lot of the younger guys and phasing out some of the older guys. Ironically enough, at this point, maybe they've already had a match with Edge and Christian at All in Texas. I don't know. Maybe it already happened. Yeah. But speaking of older guys, but this idea of, like, we're on the latter half, they might start transitioning in the next couple of years to that sort of mentor-y tag team sort of thing, right?
Yeah.
How many great years of, like, sort of a mentor tag team can we get out of them? I don't know. It is they're sort of running out of time, I think, for their case.
They are against time at this point. I will say that wrestlers' careers are going longer than, if not ever, like, definitely for the modern era. Sure. For a variety of health reasons, which is great. And if they can stay healthy, I don't see them breaking up. I don't get the point at this point in time of them breaking up, like what you would gain from that. It'd just be breaking it up to be broken up, which why? So assuming that doesn't happen, I could see them being pushed as a top tag team in AEW. I actually could foresee them. Don't know the exact ages of the Young Bucks offhand, but I think they're approximately the same ages, if I'm not mistaken, as FTR.
Quick Google. Matt Jackson, 40 years old, same age as Dax. Nick Jackson
was younger.
Is 35. Cash was 38, if I recall. Yeah,
so a couple years on Cash, but in general, like, the same neighborhood. I could see FTR wrestling, like, again, at a full-time schedule, that kind of caveat, beyond the Young Bucks. I could see the Young Bucks retiring first. Like, that's just
I would agree.
Just a vibe check kind of thing. It's just really tough for them because I could see people, voters looking at them and saying, well, sure, they're like one of the best tag teams of this era, but what does that really matter? I think that's a big problem with voters. I think it's really hard to get into the Hall of Fame in the first place as just a ring work guy. Yeah. And in fact, in the past couple of years, like, if you're looking at the inductions, you could argue, I guess, like, Tomohiro Ishii is the obvious one, right, from 2023. I guess you could argue Shingo was, but he was at least like a one-time IWGP champion, and he had the Dragon Gate accomplishments. Yeah. Kota Ibushi was an IWGP world champion, so again, I don't think that's like a true one-to-one. I mean, Ishii is their best comp and they don't have the years that Ishii does.
Correct.
They don't have the awards that Ishii does. And so I think it is a very narrow path for them.
Yeah.
Because when you look at guys, you could choose Okada, Danielson, Tanahashi, AJ Styles. They all have at least some level of drawing to their arguments. Kenny Omega, Mystico, Naito, all these guys, they all have drawing to their names, and FTR doesn't. And I think that's going to just make it a lot harder for him to get inducted.
That's also part of the problem. I think, I think it's a large thing in the ballot overall, but especially in modern US and Canada, where at this point, a lot of the major draws in US, Canada are in, pretty much.
Mm-hmm.
I think to a certain degree, I think you could say that Cody Rhodes is currently maybe kind of that exception just because of where he is currently in WWE.
Still mid-career, obviously building the case. So
yeah, but you know what I mean? Of he's certainly a top draw. He is probably the high end of top draws in modern US and Canada. Not probably, he is. But it is this thing of, we talked about this, multiple people talked about this, but I definitely know Joe Lanza talked about this with the Sabu thing of that, when you have a lot of these other top drawers already kind of in, which tend to be, the case that most people look at. And I think because it tends to be also more objective, you can look at facts and figures. You have to start looking at other things, and you have to start coming around to these more subjective things of how they are as workers, what's their significance, which, as we talked about earlier, is extremely difficult to have any sort of longevity, or not longevity, but have any sort of long-term historical significance in modern US and Canada, because so many of these people are very much still defining their stuff. Granted, there's people in here like, I guess, the Briscoes, the Steiners, Bill Goldberg, that are their career is obviously done at this point.
Yeah.
But it is this thing of so many of the other people. I mean, the new guys, McIntyre, FTR, very much still defining their careers. It's difficult to a certain degree to have these things. And then there is a subjectivity to how I think of them as a wrestler. There are data you can pull, but to make it objective and get to 60% plus for them, there's so many other people that are in here. And I think it's just, they have, I think, meat on the bone. It's just not enough meat as of now. That's my statement of the episode. Not enough meat is the thing.
And part of the problem is also the voting base, because there's a chunk that is just very you have to achieve it. The only thing I care about is drawing, or the only thing I care about is work that happened in WWE.
Correct.
And anything else outside of it doesn't matter without even the consideration of it.
We have to expand that ideology for any of these other people to really get in.
Yeah, and you can argue that maybe you should just be that for at least for large chunks of this century. But I mean, I don't know if I will vote for the Briscoes every year I can, because their work was that good and they did it for so long that I think that they're obviously a Hall of Fame level act.
Yeah.
But there are people a lot of people that just dismiss them outright because they did it in Ring of Honor and not WWE. And that's very frustrating to me. I mean, AJ Styles, his induction came after 2 less than 10% runs, one that was based entirely off of his TNA run, and one that I think was after 1 year of his New Japan run. But as soon as he touched WWE, he got voted in. If I recall the percentages correctly, that's just how a large chunk of the voting base. I do think there's kind of a newer generation of voters, which I include myself in, that are more willing to look at things outside of just the biggest companies.
Yeah.
But I think this is, there's an argument to and for it. So I'm not going to say a flaw of the voting base, but it is a inclination of a large chunk of the voting base. And I think that's an awful way to look at things, especially when it comes to ring work. I think it's very short-sighted and, kind of very narrow-minded. But, even if I don't like it, it's a fact of life that there's a lot of people that vote like that, and it's just going to stay like that, I think, for a while, for a long time, frankly.
I would love if we ever got, it would never happen, but I would love a proper poll of the voting base. It would never happen. There's no way it would happen, but just to see like age range or what do you watch, and all these sort of things. I would love that sort of poll.
Yeah, because like, I don't know. I hesitate to like. I know I'm probably saying this about like people that know a lot about wrestling, but at some point it's kind of a like knowing ball conversation. Like the Briscoes, just to me, are so obviously a Hall of Fame level act that like not voting for them like just makes me wonder. Like, okay, have you watched them? Like, did you like have you seen any of their stuff?
Yeah.
Like, or are you?
I'll pull any match from the past 10-15 years of them, and
like is it legitimate like you never watched Ring of Honor? Because like if that's the case, and I'm not like a huge Ring of Honor watcher because that came during the Fred Morlan is broke period. I couldn't and did not have good internet, so like I wasn't getting those DVDs. But I since then I've watched like I can't proclaim to like have gone deep into the archives on them, but like I've watched some of the highlight matches, and it's like how I'm like if I was in a room with insert voter X that like does not even consider them, we would watch the match, and then afterwards I would look at them, motion towards the TV with both hands, and be like, and just only be able to say how.
I think the same thing kind of applies for me with like Samoa Joe as well, and obviously there's other reasons why I think some people mentioned the sort of dumb people in charge of Samoa.
Yeah, that was me. I'll say it again. Like I don't know how you don't know how to book Samoa Joe, but like we found out that there are a lot of people apparently that are that stupid that were also given power over wrestling companies.
Mm-hmm.
Like, okay, cool. We exist in this world, I guess. This sure isn't a microcosm of everything all at once. Oh, the best definitely rise to the top. It's all a meritocracy. Don't worry about it. Everything's fine.
I feel like we're gonna tangent our way into very depressing.
No. Okay, I will cut it short here. Now, if I'm not mistaken, you asked people who they're going to vote for.
Yes, I was going to bring that up next.
Well, I just closed out the ballot because I'm really damn good at this. Hold on, I got it. Okay,
I'll set the table while I pull it up. Modern US and Canada, 17 acts, 5 votes. Technically 16 acts. I added Sabu onto this list just because I think it's very clear that Dave is adding him on. You could certainly add more people, and that would give you an extra vote, but right now it's just 5. Those people are CM Punk, Cody Rhodes, Mark and Jay Briscoe, the Steiner Brothers, Randy Orton, Edge/Adam Copeland, John Moxley, Becky Lynch, Bill Goldberg, Matt and Jeff Hardy, Samoa Joe, The Outsiders, Trish Stratus, still hanging on, Drew McIntyre, FTR, Mercedes Moné, and Sabu. Fred, why are you a Trish Stratus voter?
Don't put that mojo on me. Talking about like motioning at the TV as Mark and Jay Briscoe wrestle. How?
Yeah.
Look, I can understand kind of the impulse behind it. She was the biggest women's star in the US for like basically a 15-year period. Like I'm not the biggest star over that period, but like, within like 2000-ish to like 2013-ish around there, she was the biggest woman name wrestler that was a woman in the United States and Canada. She main evented one Raw. Like that's the conversation around her whenever we have this, whenever we people discuss her historically. Like even in WWE, all they can say is that she main evented a Raw against Lita once, and then WWE at the time immediately was like, and never again.
Yeah, it's like is it a historically significant match if like they immediately ignore it for like the next 10 years or whatever, and then it doesn't.
Now there's a lot of
thing really until like NXT Brooklyn.
Yeah, like there's a lot of conversation you can have about how this is a reflection of sexism in the industry.
Agreed.
About how women were minimized in this industry for decades and decades, going back to June Byers, who is a real Hall of Famer, by the way, compared to Trish Stratus. But Trish Stratus's case is, if you look at the black and white of it, unfortunately, not a draw. Not a high level worker. She improved nicely. Let's not kid ourselves.
Yep.
But she improved nicely to the point of like reliably having 3-ish star matches regularly.
Which there is something to say that, like, of women's wrestling of the time, that's
they were handicapped. You can definitely say that they were handicapped, but like I can't vote for that when, like, basically ring work argument is, Ishii.
Just real quickly, I know we're about to get into that next segment, but I do want to bring up a question. You've already sort of alluded to it, but this idea of the how to vote or how to approach voting for, I guess we'll apply this to tag team wrestlers as well, since we already kind of FTR. How do we approach to voting women's wrestlers and tag team wrestlers when they are naturally handicapped divisions comparative to men's singles?
It's a good question. It's a great question, actually. And I think it's a discussion that has been under addressed. There's two stances people can take. One, they can say, well, I don't care. They have to achieve the same things. You can argue about if that's fair or not.
If they're in the same category, same thing, you're comparing, you kind of implicitly are comparing everybody because you have to vote and pick 5 or whatever.
Right. But on the other hand, you can try to account for those. Like, you could argue that FTR staying together as a tag team is in some way historically significant because, they did swim against the stream and made this choice when they easily could have been like, after like 2 years on the main roster, shook hands and been like, well, we're just going to try to make it a solo act, I don't think that doesn't have a lot of juice for me, but I do think there's an argument that, like, you need to evaluate tag teams slightly differently as far as like what your expectations are, like where the line is, it's sports analogy alert. It used to be that starting pitchers and the Hall of Fame would instantly get in if they got 300 wins. But like pitching careers are getting shorter. They're throwing fewer innings. And the way of awarding wins is not really statistically sound, but also like it's just getting harder and harder. Like it's virtually impossible at this point for someone to start the career now and get 300 wins. Do you just say, well, if they don't hit 300 wins, they're not a Hall of Famer? Or do you adjust your standards to reflect the time? I think that's a stronger argument for tag teams than it is for women wrestlers in the US in the Trish Stratus era. Because look, I don't like this aspect of it, but I think that they were used horribly, and I don't think that there is any real, and you can point out there wasn't an opportunity to draw, but they weren't draws on any level. Now maybe like you can point to the TNA knockout division with Gail Kim. Maybe there's something there. I'd be willing to at least entertain that. But I just can't. I think the Trish Stratus argument is she was the best of the WWE women wrestlers that era, factoring in longevity because Lita didn't have it due to injuries. And as such, we should recognize her. And I think that's it's kind of a warped version of the Joshi in the post All Japan women, but pre-Stardom era. Like if there's an argument that, well, of course you need to have representation from there in the Hall of Fame, and it's there's the counter argument of, well, yeah, but they have to hit certain standards. And I'm not trying to slam either of your guests on the Io Shirai show, but I think there's a little bit of this in that their argument was that you can't really, it's unkind distillation of their argument, which even I don't fully agree with. But I would listen to them, and I saw how someone could interpret it this way: is that you point to Stardom's lesser drawing numbers during Io Shirai's run on top, and you would say, well, or you could sum up their argument as you can't penalize her for those numbers being unimpressive because Stardom was on the come up. But also you should give her credit for the bigger numbers that came later because of her influence on the promotion. And in a sense, I think that's a little bit of having it both ways. Mm-hmm. I can't fully agree with that argument. And I think there's something similar to Trish Stratus. Like, well, later we had Sasha Banks and Bayley and Charlotte Flair and, Becky Lynch, of course. And so trying to give her credit for that kind of seems like I don't see the through line myself. I don't see how, Trish Stratus, like other than being a woman wrestler for WWE, because again, we have to think about like the horrible way women were presented before the Four Horsewomen era. And frankly, it's not exactly like it improved overnight. But they were treated, women were just sex objects. I mean, John Laurinaitis' scouting was literally looking at swimsuit issues or underwear catalogs. Like they didn't, there wasn't any value given to it. There's the story of Michelle McCool, I think, like infamously shared the story of like being told by agents that she shouldn't work matches as well because it was making the men look bad. And there's the additional story of Chris Jericho finding out about that. I think if I'm remembering this correctly, and like being like, that's bullshit. If you're going to put on better matches, then it's up to us to step it up. But I mean, that was kind of a anomalous viewpoint at that point in time because, WWE was a terrible place. Just to be super blunt. And so like the Trish Stratus argument is just, I can't endorse it. I think she did I'm impressed by her career in the sense of how much she improved, because I don't think that she was really encouraged to improve that much. I think she was just driven to get to the point she was. And it's an impressive improvement from like bad, frankly, as she was early on to like pretty good. In the ring. And like, I think in an alternate reality where like WWE didn't, treat women as like just the worst, you could come up with a parallel true Hall of Fame path for, but we can only judge what happened, and it's really crappy, frankly. But that's just my take.
It is to go to that broader point of tag team and women. I do agree that I do think you have to sort of like, I guess in like golf terms, add the handicap to them a little bit to give them a little more like bonus points in regards to. It's almost like I talk about this like Becky Lynch, is that like, yes, she is like a top draw for the company for a year, a year and a half or so. And that is, you look at longevity and you're like, okay, that's nothing, right? That's like,
right. It's typically,
who gives a poop? But like, to me, that almost then adds into her historical significance case. The bonuses come to her historical significance of who that has never happened in this company. That has never happened in the top company in wrestling.
In the US, you'd have to go back to June Byers.
Yeah.
And obviously Mildred Burke before her, but June Byers was the last actually meaningful woman draw of any level in this country. And Fabulous Moolah turned it into a shit show, as she was wont to do, and Vince sure didn't fight against that.
Shout out Camille.
So like it sucks. I hate it, but like
it is the reality.
It is the reality. It's awful. It's like
I did not expect that for us to have this nuanced conversation on the FTR episode, but I'm loving this.
Yeah. I mean, well, like, it's part of it, right? Like it is. I think that,
to bring it all back to FTR, it is like there is this nuanced thing of, yes, they are a tag team and they are handicapped in the sense of, they aren't able to do as much as the big men single stars, but there is something like you do give them some regard and some handicap, but it is, I think to sum up also what you're saying is that there's a handicap, but there's still a level you have to hit. There's a cap. There's a level that you have to hit on top of it.
Yeah. Like, another comparison I'll make, baseball again, sorry, is that, relievers have started being voted into the Hall of Fame over the past 20 years. And there's a baseball writer I really respect who basically whenever a reliever gets voted into the Hall of Fame, even if it's Trevor Hoffman, Mariano Rivera, any of these, like, obviously like one of the best relievers of all time, is he's like, they're not as valuable as the fourth best starting pitcher in a rotation. The argument being that they pitch like a third of the innings typically.
Mm-hmm.
I get it. But also, like, the comparison is within the realm of other relievers of their era.
Yeah.
And I think that's why those guys are Hall of Famers. And I think there's an argument that you should kind of consider making that kind of like, you should compare tag teams to tag teams to a certain extent.
Do you think a solve for this is separating the tag teams and women's into their own category? Is that something we need to solve? Is that a problem we need to solve?
Women, I would argue that the real problem would be to get a time machine and not allow sexism to take over the industry. And
I mean, that's fair.
and like prevent Vince from whatever fucked up things happened to him when he was a kid that led to motions at everything. So I'm not legally liable.
I appreciate it.
But I mean, with that, no, I mean, I unfortunately, the U.S. wrestling was what it was from the post Burke Byers era to the Four Horsewomen era.
Yeah.
Now, I will say that, my interpretation is that, yes, Becky Lynch was only a top draw for 2 years, ? I'm not sure. There's a lot of different ways to define it, of course. And like, Ethan Tyler, I think, is, generous. Not in a bad way, but like is more generous than your average person when it comes to the Becky Lynch drawing years argument.
Sure.
But I think the thing with her that works for me is basically it's like the old line, Ginger Rogers did everything Fred Astaire did, but she had to do it backwards and in heels. That's kind of, yes, physically she had to do that, but she also had to fight through like the sexism of the industry of Hollywood at that point in time.
Yeah.
And Becky Lynch became the top wrestler in WWE, the biggest company in the world, as a woman, in that, again, the company had softened how it viewed women wrestlers and all this, but like she still did it. Yes. And she was able to overcome all that. And I apologize that the fact my lawn is now being mowed.
No,
this
good.
Is great audio, folks. Sorry about that.
But not just fighting upstream of there's the fighting upstream of the sexism, which is a big part of it. There is a softening of how they view women's wrestling after NXT Brooklyn that opens up that pathway to a large degree. But then in real time, WWE actively wanting to book Charlotte Flair as the bigger deal.
Yeah.
To a fair degree, especially at the time, Ronda Rousey.
Yes. And boy, that Charlotte addiction they had, really weird in hindsight. I get the Flair name having its value and everything, but outside of like Vince and maybe Dave Meltzer, I don't think many people would have agreed with those assessments. I don't know. The Becky thing works for me because she did hit that super high level, and the Trish thing doesn't work for me because she never hit that super high level, and she was never putting on like 4.5-star bangers like every time she got a chance. So like the influence case with her is just women wrestlers came after her. But
watched her on TV as they grew up and came after her.
I don't know. That's not sufficient for me, I guess. So, maybe that makes me a sexist. I hope not.
That's what this podcast was about. Is discovering
making me a worse person.
This was a gotcha journalism.
Damn. Got my ass. But it's unfortunate, but it's also unfortunate that you can go up and down the list. Unfortunate that FTR was misused all these years in WWE. Yep. Unfortunate that Samoa Joe was booked so poorly by people for so long. It's unfortunate that Magnum TA was in that car wreck.
Yeah.
So on and so forth. And when it comes to the Hall of Fame, even if the history is ugly, and it is at many points, the history is the history, and we have to kind of acknowledge that.
I agree.
So I don't know. I think that's all I really have to cogently say on this discussion.
Well, then I guess we'll end up here with you get 5 votes to bring it all the way back around. You get 5 votes.
Yeah.
Who would you vote in modern US and Canada as of right now?
Here's the problem for me is that last year my 7 votes were the Young Bucks got in.
Yep.
Paul Orndorff got in.
Yep.
Becky Lynch, CM Punk, the Briscoes, Jon Moxley, and Cody Rhodes.
Uh-huh.
That's 5 people left on my ballot.
Mm-hmm.
None of the new additions really moved the needle for me. No, I mean new additions. So that would be Drew McIntyre, FTR, Mercedes Moné. I like Drew a lot. He's another victim of bad booking and the whole there's one drawing company and it's run by a guy whose brain is slowly turning into jelly. And so
his peak run is during the pandemic.
Yeah, and some people that's a knock. I don't think so. I think that,
I just mean the drawing thing of I can't pull those numbers.
But he was on top of WWE for a year, that's not nothing. But it is very short, especially for a man. After the conversation we just had, his match quality is really good, but he's also kind of stuck,
Yep.
In this company that doesn't care about that. And he did just have feud of the year with CM Punk, so that's a point in his favor. But I just don't think he's put enough points on the board yet. Now, again, in this era of longer careers, if he sticks around another 5 years and is a major star, yeah, sure, I won't discount it. But I worry that we're already seeing where he is viewed within WWE, which is as the second tier guy. And barring a change in that or a change of scenery to AEW where he's pushed as a top guy, it just seems like he's not going to get pushed as that level of draw, and he's not going to get that many opportunities for the matches.
Yeah.
And then that's kind of the argument for him.
Yeah.
Mercedes
discussed.
Yeah, Mercedes Moné is interesting, and I think there's maybe I should look at her closer. I have her not on my ballot at this point. But I will look closer at her because we're several months out. From when we record this, we're 4 months out, basically.
Yes.
Okay.
Because October, I believe October. Well, is October when they come
It's usually
out?
October or November when it comes out, if I'm not mistaken, depending on Dave's schedule.
Yes.
I think there's some bite there. I'm not ruling it out at this point. I haven't sat down and convinced myself into it yet, but.
I personally like Mercedes more than FTR.
Of the 3 new additions, she is the best candidate to me by a pretty good margin.
Yeah.
So we'll have to look at that. I'm not saying no at this point, but I'm not automatically adding her onto my ballot. Sabu,
I could see her staying on.
I don't think she's an instant fall off. If she fell off, I wouldn't be shocked outside of the fact that hypothetically Trish Stratus will continue to receive her 10.5% until the heat death of the universe. And in comparison, Mercedes Moné falling off would be a big okay, hold on. Kind of moment.
Yes.
Also, just as an aside, this suggests that there are people out there that vote for Trish but not for Becky Lynch. Just going to say that out loud and then move on. Sabu. I think he is at worst the 3rd best argument for the Hall of Fame of this part of the ballot. Probably behind Cody Rhodes, probably behind CM Punk.
Mm-hmm.
But I think just knee jerk, I think I would put him above the Briscoes.
Okay.
And so that leaves me with Becky Lynch. I'm keeping Becky on the ballot. So that would mean that I'm probably dropping Jon Moxley for Sabu, which feels a little appropriate because this past year hasn't exactly been past 18 months haven't exactly been super strong years for Jon, other than the fact he's on top.
Yeah.
I think the drawing over the past few months with AEW have been respectable. The first couple months of this whole Death Riders thing outside the initial turn were pretty bad, I thought. But
agreed.
Once the calendar flipped to 2025, it's been better. But I still gotta I like Moxley. I think he should get in eventually. I mean, just already based off of what he's already done. He could retire today, and I think he'd be a Hall of Famer. But Sabu's influence case is maybe the best argument. Individual, like, person, like, you know, as far as like part of the argument for a person of anyone on this US and Canada ballot, because, you know, I think Kevin Hare said this. You can divide professional wrestling in the United States into before Sabu and after Sabu. And I think that's a very fair way to look at it, because so much of what Sabu did was adopted throughout the wrestling landscape, table spots in particular, but just like this kind of like death-defying style is very widespread now. And it's easy to kind of hand wave that because of the way it's being implemented in some corners. Cough WWE, cough. Of, you know, every commercial break has to be preceded by a tope, and now we have Slim Jim branded tables apparently, which is
I'm pretty sure that's what Sabu wanted when he was doing all.
Of course, yes, that's
big Slim Jim guy.
Oh yeah, snap into him. That's what Sabu said. Those were
he'd point to the sky and say, "Snap into it." He's pointing.
That's what exactly in his head. That's what happened at every single ring entrance.
He's pointing up to. He's holding a Slim Jim actually,
and not even for like, you know, promotional purposes. That was just love of the gym.
Hillbilly notwithstanding.
Right. No, different conversation. No, but seriously, like, Joe Lanza told this story, and I hadn't heard it before just because I kind of haven't dug super deep into like all the nuances of Sabu's career. But the story that Lanza told in his summary of Sabu's career is that very early in Sabu's run, like 93, Vince brought Sabu in for a tryout match, which I think is the somewhat infamous Scott Taylor one that is on YouTube now. And he wanted to sign Sabu, but he wanted to have him do basically a table spot every time to get the pop. And Sabu argued against this. And this is, I think, a big check against the Sabu didn't have psychology argument you hear so often. Sabu argued against that because he was like, it's not my character like doing this as his thing. It's my character being so desperate and so driven to win a match that he will use anything around the ring to do it, and that includes the tables that are there. And Vince didn't get it because Vince just saw like marketing opportunity, and so Sabu didn't sign. And I don't think that run would have been a success either, given what was going on in the company at that point and Vince's limited view of wrestling.
Which I will just say real quickly, because that made me immediately think of he just uses what's there. The Sabu John Cena match, that sort of famous one that people, I mean, I guess not necessarily famous, but like low key famous or whatever. He doesn't use a table for that match. He uses the announce table. Like, to speak to that idea of like, he could have just done the sort of what is it, like springboard leg drop, I think is what he uses in the match onto a table. No, he uses the announce table because that's what's there.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think the Sabu has bad psychology argument doesn't really hold water when you look at it like a little deeper than just like, look at this dude doing crazy spots and botching a certain number of them. And you know, there is the story that Sabu would say that like he planned some of these botches, and if it was anyone else, I think it's bullshit. I think that's just like Chris Jericho being embarrassed that a move didn't go right or something, or like wanting to be like, oh no, that was all the plan, you know? Sabu, I believe. Because the other stories of how he worked, like, I truly believe that he'd be like, I my character is a person who, you know, again, so driven to win, they'll use anything he can, and also so desperate to win that like he'll try something that he can't pull off, and that'll lead to like the opponent having control or something. Like, that makes sense to me. I don't see why that would not be the reality.
How else can he be desperate if he isn't like kinda bad? You know what I mean?
Yeah, well, not really bad, but like,
I don't mean that in a derogatory sense.
Yeah, sure, but like overextending himself is probably how I phrase it.
That's a better phrasing.
Yeah. He was never portrayed as a bad wrestler in the ring. It wasn't like we're talking Gilbert here, but
yes, that's a better phrase.
Shout out Gilbert. But yeah, like the Sabu has no psychology thing just doesn't make sense to me from what I've seen of him and what I know about like the way he approached stuff. If he had that Vince conversation, was like, hell yeah, let's just break tables for whatever reason, that's different. And also, I think it's really bullshit to attribute like the crappy uses of what he did to him, like saying like, oh, there's Slim Jim tables now, that means Sabu was bad, actually is kind of crazy to me, because like that's not Sabu's fault. It's the fault of like so much stuff downstream from Sabu.
Yeah,
that like basically, it's the fault of people being lazy and not wanting to work the same way, the more nuanced, frankly, which seems like a crazy thing to say, but I think it's true, the more nuanced way the Sabu worked.
That is, we talk about like Sabu's psychology being this one way, getting it to the we want tables chance and tables anywhere and the Slim Jim thing. That is Vince's psychology. That is exactly when he wanted to bring in Sabu.
The WWE psychology and like, lazy psychology. Like it's the way, the comparison is that it's like WWE using that run through the barricade in that one spot, every big guy match seemingly.
Yeah.
Like, that's not whoever did that first or whoever came up with that first fault. It's the fact that WWE is we do things over and over because we want you to have a very simple view of our performers and to know like they do three things and that those three things are coming. And sometimes that's a table spot. And
when people speak to Sabu not having psychology, they're speaking to he doesn't have Vince's psychology.
Yeah. And like, I think Sabu, his influence argument is tremendous, not just between that, but also like Hayabusa. I referenced this earlier, but Hayabusa was like, I want to work like Sabu. And, Sabu, who was 5 years into his run, was across the ring from him and like, what the
fuck? He's doing my thing.
I'm coming here to do this. Why are you stealing my bit? But and then downstream from that, like, like you go back to the, one of my all-time favorite TV matches is the Kenny Omega Hijo del Vikingo thing.
Yeah.
I think that's like not just one of the best TV matches, but like one of the best matches of all time, in my opinion. I like athleticism in my matches. And I know that, some people be like, oh, there wasn't enough psychology or whatever. There was, you don't like, I think some people, their idea of psychology is like 1987 selling. Mm-hmm. Where like, someone targets your leg and so that means that you can never walk again, essentially. We have like years of UFC of seeing like what someone struggling through a leg being kicked to death looks like or whatever. We have some realism now. We know that like if you have
immediate one-to-one immediate comparisons of what it looks like to be hurt.
Yeah, and like it's not, different conversations. Sorry, I'm pulling myself off here because I don't want to just ramble on forever. I promised myself this would be under 90 minutes. I failed at that.
Sorry, I didn't know.
No. It's my fault because I'll just what I found out with I was just on G-Plug Jumping Bomb audio to discuss the FSM 50, or I'm sorry, the 30 under 30 list Voices of Wrestling is doing, and I went full stream of consciousness on that one. So if you want to have someone, if you want to witness someone having a going into a fugue state about wrestling, I think I came pretty damn close there. But yeah, I mean, okay, so Sabu, basically I'll cut it off here. Sabu is, I think, a clear Hall of Famer. I think he should be in. In my mind, he should get 60% easily. I also think CM Punk is like an obvious Hall of Famer, even with the AEW stuff. And trust me, you're not as traumatized as I am because I had to do a weekly podcast during all of that. It went on forever. It was just dumb as hell. Yeah. And it's just like, why can we not just take these 5 people in a room and just lock them in there and tell them you're all idiots? Stop being idiots.
Yeah. I did weekly Ring Post Radio during all of it, and luckily we talk about everything else in the world. So it's like, some weeks we can just skip whatever this is.
I couldn't. I had nothing else. I had to talk about AEW. I'm locked in. I can't just like do the show and say they're all stupid and I hate them.
I mean, I guess you could have. It would have been interesting.
But then people would probably expect a little more than that. Anyways, and I think Cody Rhodes is obviously a strong draw for 4 years now, right?
Yeah.
And you add in the influence of AEW being founded and his drawing there to whatever extent you want to give him credit for. Yeah, I think that's easy. The Briscoes, I mean, 15-ish years of like a super great tag team. Come on now.
Underrated. I was looking through cage match results, not cage match results, but cage match ratings
Voting.
for like Briscoes, Young Bucks, FTR, just to do the Usos. I just added in since we're on the ballot last year, just to see like comparisons and whatnot for like the past 10 years. Briscoes have less 8+ matches on cage match, 8+ rated matches on cage match than FTR. But I do think it's like, yeah, they're less rated, but I think a big part of that is a large chunk of that is just they are underrated, truly underrated, because they were truly in Ring of Honor the entire time.
That, and also there's a big part of it due to how cage matches function historically. So for a long time, you could only rate certain matches on there that the administrators chose. And so, going back to like the peak of the Ring of Honor run for the Briscoes, you could have just opened up like the latest Ring of Honor show and rate whatever match you wanted. They had to add it to their match guide.
Yeah.
And that was initially how it worked. And so going back, just pulling up a random episode of ROH Wrestling that had Briscoes versus Daniels and Kazarian match. I bet that was pretty damn good. Probably I'd be shocked if I didn't hit at least 3.5 stars on that. Knowing the limits of that TV show, I could see it being capped at like 4, basically.
Yeah.
But this match that aired and was, on their TV show only has 4 ratings on it. And I bet it's because, in fact, let me open it back up. When was the first rating for this 2016 match? 2022. So there you go. So, part of it is knowing how cage match works. And just as a warning to other people, going back like that, you had to, hope or even request on their now defunct forums that they would add a match to their match guide. So anyways, that's part of why the Briscoes are lower on that, I would say.
Just for the context, I do have those data points. For the past 10 years, 8+ or higher. FTR 27 matches, the Briscoes 16, the Usos 10. Would you like to get a guess on the Young Bucks?
53.
No, 75.
Oh wow, yeah, even higher.
That means they had roughly 7.5, 8 plus star matches a year for the past 10 years.
And boy, imagine how good they'd be if they learned how to work.
Where's the psychology, Fred?
Yeah. Probably right with Sabu's, who definitely didn't have any.
Well,
anyways,
let's close up shop here. We gotta close up shop. You didn't hit your 90-minute goal, so I'm forcing you to close up the shop.
Sure. Okay.
I say that, but my next statement was going to be, Fred, give us the plugs in classic podcast fashion, but also if you have any final thoughts on FTR that you want to say, you can say them now.
Okay. I am so happy they turned heel. They have ruled this year. Really, they've been one of the best acts in AEW this year. Just from a me standpoint, just pure enjoyment. They're just such a great collection of jerks. Just big old jerks.
Stokely Hathaway, great addition.
Oh, great addition. I'm so happy. Now, I thought Stoke and heel Chris Statlander was really good. And then they basically turned heel or turned stat face because Mercedes Moté, I assume, was I'd like to work with her, but I'm still a heel. And so they're well, we got to end this act now to make that happen. And we just are, which is really bad for Statlander. It sucks. But Stokely was great in that. And they really struggled for a while to find a way to use Stokely Hathaway, which is kind of shocking in a sense. But I feel like they found another great use for him. And this pairing with FTR It's just jerks being jerks, and it's really like it's not that old school, but like in an era of like kind of ironic heels or like the Dominic Mysterio kind of heel that people like, but they're booing. Like there's no like this is a Don Callis heel. And it's not even like kind of mimetic how the Don Callis booing has got to a certain extent. That's not a negative thing, but like there's a little bit of like, I'm at an AEW show, Don Callis is showing up, I must boo as loud as possible. But,
there's becoming a wink to the
a little bit, but he's still a great heel. So like I don't want to make it sound like I'm knocking him, but like FTR is getting these boos and there's no sense of like irony or I'm being part of the show or anything. I think it's just like these guys are jerks. And I love that. I mean, wrestling is so great because it has these heel characters that are like, to varying degrees. It's not a direct comparison, but it's a vibes check of like Snidely Whiplash, you have these cartoons of like these heels that think they're better than they are. Yes. And will eventually get their comeuppance. And that is a great wrestling heel. Like that's the prototype. And FTR is like 100% down that kind of path, and it rules. Plugs. As mentioned at the beginning, you can find my podcast, The Good, the Bad, and the Hungee, that I co-host with the wonderful Tyler Fornes, where we host virtually weekly, though this year's schedule has been kind of wild between the two of us. And we just discussed what's going on in AEW. I think tomorrow we're going to be having a discussion about wrestler movement, given the currently unnamed Mariah May, her debut in NXT and various other moves in the wrestling landscape. Maybe less of a Dynamite breakdown than usual. But once in a while, we'll have special guests. Next month, we're looking at bringing RJ City back.
Nice.
We may literally discuss no wrestling directly on that episode, which I would be okay with. We had him on before, and I thought it was a great conversation, so look at that for the back issues. We've also had Dave Meltzer on, which was a tremendous thing, and I may try to get him on again for like Hall of Fame season as we get closer to, just discuss that.
That's like I feel like that's gonna be my white whale for the ballot. It's also the question of, do I have Dave on? I don't know if I should. You know what I mean? Like in terms of like the format of the show, I don't even know how I could put Dave into the show.
Maybe we talk off air.
Interesting.
Also, I have just rebooted, like in the past week, my Patreon, where I just write. I don't do audio, so if you think I'm annoying as hell, maybe you'll like my writing better. I don't know. So in the past week, I have written a thing about cage match ratings of Raw match quality. I have done match reviews of Raw, Julia, and Roxanne Perez against Io Sky and Rhea Ripley. The CMLL Team Torion versus Team Querétaro match from February. I posted an early look at a couple articles I posted in Voices of Wrestling. Specifically, I'm doing a monthly FSM 50 diary that documents my attempts to watch all the wrestling that I will fail at dramatically, but it's just fun to talk about good wrestling that I'm watching. Yeah. And it's kind of catch-all way to do that. I also posted my review to Dean 2 early on my Patreon before it went on Voices of Wrestling. I reviewed the New Japan Naito and Hiromu versus Ishii and Taichi match from April, which was really good. And then I just reviewed the AJ Styles Kurt Angle match from the kind of infamous January 4th, 2010 Impact. Because I wanted to, and I ruled. So you can check that out at patreon.com/flagrant wrestling. And we're trying to keep the writing pace up on there, but variations with schedule and stuff. But it's $5 a month. You get extra writing about wrestling. So if you like reading about it, if you like just reading like random thoughts, I have a post about the R-Truth release / contract non-extension in the barrel. I just need to put the finishing touches on that. I'm hoping to have that done by the end of the week, but I'm going to make that a free post. So if you want to just wait for that, although we're releasing this in 2 months, so if you want to go back in time, if you want to go back in time, as I realize how stupid I am, you can check that out and take a look and see how lovely that article is on what is now months old news. I am good at plugging.
In your defense,
give me money.
In your defense, it's tough. It's sometimes tough to remember. Like, oh yeah, and I appreciate you coming on.
No problem.
Knowing that this is coming out 2 months later, but I think it's going to be a great conversation, episode to release.
And if you're a fan of this podcast, I do recommend going to Voices of Wrestling and looking at my backlog of articles, because I've written several things about the Hall of Fame and various levels, fairly deep dives, mainly a lot of statistical look at like the history of the Observer Award voting, using the award shares, but also like I am taking credit for how Dave has changed his labeling of people on the ballot, which is this very inside Hall of Fame discussion. But basically, for years, he wouldn't tell you which people were like counted as non-wrestlers and which weren't. And that led to a lot of confusion. And so I wrote an article comparing it to the butterfly ballot of the infamous Al Gore, George W. Bush election from 2000, which definitely had no ramifications for later on. And, but like there's a squid kind of comparison kind of thing. And Dave changed that after that. And I'm personally taking credit for it, and you can't stop me.
I love it. I love to hear it. Well, Fred, thank you so much for coming onto the ballot. I thought this was a great episode.
Thank you so much for having me. I had a great time.
Great, minute discussions about so much regarding the Wrestling Observer Hall of Fame. We'll be back next month for an all new episode. This is coming out 2 months from now, so I have an idea of what next month will be about, and I have an idea of who that will be discussing that person. But that is 3 months away at this point, and I'm just going to let that dingling Chad live there. I guess it won't be named Chad, so there's that. Thank you, everybody, for listening to this month's episode of The Ballot. We'll be back next month for a new conversation about an all-new wrestler. Until then, see you later. Bye, everybody. This has been a Countout Podcast. Ring Post Radio is the only show hosted by Ryan Knightsey and Scotty Edwards that talks about the entire world of professional wrestling. With new episodes coming out every Sunday, there is absolutely no reason to not listen to real, honest wrestling opinions from two crazy maniacs. Have a hot boy summer and listen along to Ring Post Radio every Sunday on the Countout Network.